Okay. How's everyone doing? We're good? It's different practicing later on in the day. For food reasons, you feel different in your body too. Is your normal schedule, it's usually mornings, everyone? Mornings, yeah. Yeah, so 4:30 is a little, a different time for sure. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Dharma, and I'm going to go into a little bit of my story, but we're going to talk a lot about yoga. I'm going to basically put it out there like the Yoga Sutras, and I'm going to do a little bit of, get you to think a little bit about your practice and what it means to practice and those kind of things. Lately I shared at lunch that I've been hurt. I've hurt both of my knees, and as a result, I've had to figure out how to keep the practice sort of fresh and alive. When it's actually easy to quit, even for someone who's done it for almost 20 years, because like pain of what is being associated with the practice, and so I've basically like tried to dial into the depth, because it's really difficult when you have an injury to maintain sort of the physicality, but also get that physicality, whatever you're able to have it affect the mind the same way it does when you really are pushing. Because when you're really pushing and you're really working hard in the yoga practice, like we did today, or like we did just a little bit ago, it shifts perspectives of how you feel about yourself, how comfortable you are in your own body. The thoughts that you have shifted as a result of them, opened up new pathways or new possibilities. And so when you're injured or you got something like that going on, or something, devastating in your life, it doesn't have to necessarily be an injury, the practice is home, Yeah, it's definitely home. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk about the Yoga Sutras and how that sort of plays into, into life and also onto our mat. That sound like a plan? Does anyone need to talk about the lead class? Do we need to talk about the trauma of the lead class? Or are we okay? Are we good? You didn't die. You might have given some dirty looks. It's okay. It's okay. Everyone in the U.S. they hurt with me. They roll their eyes so hard they hurt themselves. This is a common thing. So I'm used to the dirty looks, aren't I? Yeah. So yeah, I'm totally used to it. It's fine. But I also I feel like number one, we need to go over what the schedule is for the rest of the week, and so it's 8:30 to 10:30 tomorrow, okay, which is a different time than what we practiced during the week, and obviously a different time than the leg class. So everyone hears that, right? 8:30, and then the next thing is that the workshop is from 1 to 3, and the first workshop is going to be sort of fundamentals. So we're going to talk about everything fundamental-wise, which will be really important. And then obviously the last one is back bends. And the best part about that is that if it's something that you like or don't like, it can help you give some like technique and tools in order to like figure out how to do them better, or maybe without pain too, if you're experiencing pain with them. Okay, everyone cool with that? Any questions with any of that stuff? All right, and then last thing before I start on my spiel, I need to give thanks to Gosha and Eva, and then also Suzanne for having me here. This is my first time here. They invited someone that they did not know, myself, and I'm getting to know them now. And you know, it's an honor to be here. And so thank you for supporting my teaching, and I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to teach some of your students as well. So yeah, it means a lot to me. All right. Yeah.
It means a lot to us that you come to our small shop.
Yeah. And Cologne is beautiful. It is. It's a really nice. It's a really nice city. So I'm sitting in that room over there, and I was like, I wish I brought my wife. We would have so much fun, like on all of the cafes and stuff. Instead, I'm in my room playing on my iPad. Next time. Yeah, I take the iPad and then zoom her in. Yeah, she won't do that. But yeah, I want to give thanks because it means a lot. And so, like, things are weird right now. Still, you know, it's like, and so I've had so many workshops cancel, and I've had new workshops come on, and I've had, you know, a small number at some, you know, the workshops that I've done in the U.S., and then other ones have been the biggest workshops I've ever taught. It like, none of it makes sense. And there's people that are comfortable with the things that are happening with COVID, and there's people that are not comfortable with the COVID stuff. I still have 30 people online every single day. You know, it's pretty crazy that, you know, there's such a big gap between, like, I don't know what people feel okay is for them. And so I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to travel. I'm grateful that the immigration let me in. Customs let me in. They gave me a hard time, but it was good. So I'm going to talk tonight, and I mean, I'm probably, I don't know what time I was supposed to end, but it would probably be close to 8, something like that. Yeah, pretty close to 8. And you know, I'm going to explain sort of why I'm teaching, because I never like set out to be a yoga teacher. That was not really one of the things that like I signed up for. Like I was going to be a businessman, or I was going to, you know, like run a company, or, you know, I was, you know, as a kid, I was going to be like a firefighter, you know. It's like a yoga teacher was never like one of the things that they were like, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do. You know, because when I was first introduced to it, honestly, I was like, it's for girls. Like I literally thought it was for girls. And this was when I was first getting sober, actually. You know, the practice was introduced to me, and it happened because I was in the process of working the steps of recovery, the 12 steps of recovery, and I don't expect you to know what they are, but you work the 12 steps of recovery. You know, there is no like magic pill or magic thing that you can do to get yourself out of addiction. There is none. I mean, it's only through praying and doing the work of the steps that it gives a person the opportunity to be sober. And really, it's a blessing when you do have the chance to be sober, because like the percentage of people that get sober is like less than 3%. Yeah, in the U.S. it's less than 3%. 3% chance because of the introduction of fentanyl and other drugs that are very, very hardcore, heroin, things like that. And so there's like a 3% chance that you're going to get it. So if you get sober, it's a blessing. You might not realize it at the time, but once you get some time under your belt of being sober or abstaining from alcohol, you realize that not a lot of people are able to do this. Not a lot of people are able to do it. So I was in the process of getting sober when this lady came into my life, and you kind of remind me of her, just for the record. Yeah. And so her name was Joni, and I didn't know her at the time, but I did sort of know of her, and she was like the crazy yoga lady. And no disrespect, I don't mean to. At that time, that's what I thought she was. And I'm not saying that you're crazy yet. I don't mean that in that way. So, But so we got done, and we were in a meeting, and the meeting was an hour long, and she was across the room, and I remember like looking over at her. She was like literally like this. It was a circle, big meeting, and it was an hour long, and she like kept on staring at me. And right around, just to give some context, right around this time, I was working the 11th step. I was 6 months sober, and I was working the 11th step. And the 11th step is sought, it's like the actual step, is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. That is the step. Now, the steps, you work the exact same way as how you would work the sutras, okay? So, and just to put this in context, because I don't expect you to know this, the sutras, when you read the one line of the sutra, you don't just like acknowledge it and be like, oh, I checked that off, like I'm done with it. You know, like when you read the book of the sutras, it's like you read it, you read the commentary, you process it. How does this apply to my life? How would I make this happen in my life? How do I open up this door that they're talking about? Like, you know, all of those kind of things. Maybe I need to pray, or maybe I need to meditate. And so the 11th step, you work all of the steps the exact same way as what you do the sutras. So like, I read the step, and I read it with my sponsor, and I wrote about it, and I processed it with them. I read like a commentary of like how other people have done this before. And I got done, and I remember looking at my sponsor, and he said, I think that you have the prayer thing taken care of. And I was like, yeah, I do. I know how to pray. You know, like I grew up in a church. I know how to pray. I felt like there was a connection to some sort of higher power, some sort of universal thing that I believed in. And then I also, but the other side of it is prayer and meditation. I didn't know what meditation was. It never made sense to me like what meditation was. And so he said to me, why don't you pray to get some guidance on meditation? Okay? Fast forward 3 hours later, I'm sitting in a meeting, and the lady's sitting across from me. And I've already said sort of like my prayers, like, hey, can you open up this channel so that I can be taught meditation? Like I remember saying that in my head. And the lady's sitting across from me, and when the meeting gets done, she comes directly over to me. And when she came over to me, she said these exact words. She said, I think I'm supposed to teach you yoga. And I was like, no, you are not supposed to teach me yoga. And I said, yoga's for girls, and I'm not interested in it. Thanks for asking me, but I'm not into it. And now I was like 6 months sober, like sort of fresh off the streets. You know, I was rough around the edges. I was rough. It's hard to explain exactly. I was borderline. I mean, I was living in like crack houses and things. You know, like I didn't actually live on the streets. I wasn't homeless, but like I was in, you know, we call them trap houses. You get trapped in them, you know, and I lived like that. Excuse me. I lived like that for a long time, and it was scary. It was like, you know, facing death every single day. You know, at the result of like your own actions, your own decisions. You know, the consequences like could be life or death. Like, you know, putting a needle in your arm and dying. You know, as a result of, you know, being an addict. And so this lady comes over to me, and she's asking me, like, if I want to do her yoga. And I was like, no, I do not. I'm not interested in it. And I kind of shoot her away. Now, to put things in perspective, like, I'm a Taurus. I'm extremely stubborn, okay? I'm pretty stubborn. Anybody else a Taurus in here? No? No? It's astrology. Okay. And so I'm a Taurus. I'm stubborn. You know, I got 4 feet on the ground. I'm pretty grounded. But this lady wasn't going to talk me into doing yoga. So later on in the day, she comes, or I'm like walking down the street. I'm walking my dog, and down, it's on my street. She's walking on the other side. This is later on in the day, and she yells across the road. She says, hey, it's so weird that I'm seeing you here. Are you sure you don't want to do my yoga class? And I was like, well, what are you doing in my neighborhood? Well, like it's weird, right? And so then I was like, I'm still not doing your yoga class, and I like carried on. Okay. Well, I don't know what's happening with this. So then I went to the grocery store for dinner. I went to the grocery store and I went to like or supermarket, and I went down the Italian aisle. I was making like spaghetti. And I remember I took a left-hand turn into the Italian aisle with the pastas and with the pasta sauce, and the lady was standing there again. Okay? And she said, "This is really weird. I can't believe we've see each other 3 times today." She said, "But I think this is like a sign that you need to do my yoga class." And I was like, "You're out of your mind. You're pissing me off now. And it's kind of scary that I keep on seeing you, right? Like it's a little awkward." Now, I go to bed, I eat dinner, go to bed, wake up in the morning, go to another meeting. And this meeting is usually about 100 people. It's a very big meeting. And it was packed. It was totally packed. And there was a seat that was right here that no one sat in. No one sat in this seat. It's kind of sad. It's like 100 people, and like the one seat is like next to me where no one sits. But the meeting starts, and like if someone right now came into this room, we would all be like, like who is this person? So I'm like listening to the announcements of the meeting as they sort of like bring it to a head, and all of a sudden the door opens up, and everyone looks at the door, and it's the lady. And the only seat that she has is right here, right next to me. And she whispered next to me, and she said, "This is so weird." She said, "I think you're supposed to do my yoga class." And I was like, "Leave me alone." This is number 4. This is number 4 time. And I saw her like, I guess, five times. And I went, I got done with the meeting, and I ran out of the place. It like kind of scared me. I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And this was a meeting that I frequented very often, and she did not frequent very often. And so it definitely also felt weird. And so I went to get lunch. I'm pumping gas into petrol into my car, and I hear someone whistling. And I said in my head, I am, whoever this is, who's whistling is extremely happy. It's like you don't hear whistling today. Like when I was a kid, I feel like you heard a lot more whistling, a lot of people like kind of doing tunes that way. And I looked over, and it was her again. She was on the other side of the pump, and she said, "Wow, it's so amazing that I've seen you 5 times or whatever." And she said, "Are you going to do my yoga class?" And I said, "Fine, I'll do your goddamn yoga class." That was exactly what I said to her, because I was kind of mad about it, And so I called my sponsor, and my sponsor said, like, "What step are you working on?" And I said, "Well, first off, I'm working the steps with you. You know what step I'm on. I'm on the 11th step, and the 11th step is thought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Like, why are you asking me to say this step to you?" And he was like, well, after I said it, he was like, "Well, isn't yoga meditation?" And I remember like having this like gasp, and the gasp was like, it was literally like, shit, because yoga is meditation, and I'm so stubborn that I didn't see this message that was coming through. Like nowadays, like I don't get, like God doesn't speak in my ear, okay? Like it doesn't happen. It has happened, but God doesn't really speak in my ear. And nowadays, what I realize is that my higher power is actually speaking through other people to me. And I had a perfect opportunity to listen the first time, and I didn't, And it was, and so I sort of said that gasp, and I was like, why didn't I just listen from the beginning? Because I was willing to do whatever it took in order to get sober. And sobriety is like a very difficult thing to achieve, like I was talking about. Okay, I was in a hospital before, and I was basically admitted to the hospital, and I spent many days there in order to be detox from heroin, and like you would think by the time I reached like the 11th step and have 6 months of sobriety, I would be like this open, I'd be available to like take these suggestions of things of like, or how I'm supposed to live my life. And I rejected it, and I was willing to do whatever it took in order to get sober. It showed a lot about the willingness of me wanting to change, And the thing about it is yoga, and I think this happens with a lot of people actually, yoga, the word yoga gets put out there, and then all of a sudden they immediately reject it because it makes people feel vulnerable. Okay, like I own a yoga school called Ashtanga Yoga Columbus, and you know how many 10 class passes I've sold, and then the person uses two of the classes, and it's their first time ever doing yoga. They use 2 classes, and then they never show up again. Yeah. I'm like, well, thanks for the money, but like I really wish you would show up because like, it works. And so there's a resistance to it, and it's partly because like it makes people feel vulnerable. And I immediately felt vulnerability as soon as someone like mentioned yoga. I actually questioned my masculinity. Like it did. It like I wasn't sure, because in the United States, like it wasn't cool to practice yoga until like 2009. And where 2009 was like when P90X came out. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that here in Europe, but there was like this workout program by this guy named Tony Horton, and like whoever bankrolled him, whoever financed the tape that he made or the course that he made, put commercials on non-stop in the US. Like it was non-stop running of commercials. Like he's one of the most famous like workout guys in the United States, and in that he was talking about how yoga is very beneficial, and as a guy he was practicing on a commercial, and so then after 2009 it was like acceptable to practice yoga. Like it really was a big shift, and this is before 2009. This is several years before 2009. And so, I'm sitting there and I'm like, it like questioned my masculinity. I was like, I'm like too tough to practice yoga, or where I came from was too tough. There's so much resistance, and I never even had done it before, Yeah, it's so weird. It's a very interesting, there's almost like this rejection of like this fundamental truth or something that can be a life-saving tool for someone. Like myself, like it was almost immediate rejection of it before I even had tried it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else had an experience like this? Yeah. It's like, and sometimes the people come around, and other times they go and they do Pilates, and they never come back to yoga. It gets introduced to them, and they're like, I'm gonna pass on that. A hard pass. Because it works. It's scary, It's scary that it works so good. So she invited me to this 4-week beginner's class, and it was 4 Saturdays in a row. Or I'm sorry, a 10-week beginner's class, which is a really long time. We at Ashtanga Yoga Columbus, we do a 4-week one, and she was teaching a 10-week one, and it's like way too much. It was a lot. And so you were taught the practice over these 10 weeks, once every Saturday, and then you had like a couple classes that you could do like during the week, which I never did. I just did this. Yeah. Right. So, so she told me about the class, and I was like, okay, and I talked to my sponsor, and I was like, fine, it is meditation. He was like, yeah, you need to go get a mat. You need to go get yourself prepared for it, all that kind of stuff. And so Saturday shows up, and I went to like the supermarket and bought a yoga mat, or at least I thought it was a yoga mat. It was like one of those thick exercise mats. Yeah. Have you seen them? Yeah. And like I remember like looking at the mats in the store, and I was like, oh, that one must be a better one because it's like thicker. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Too soft.
Yeah, so we were trying to do standing postures, and I'm like, it's like waves of the ocean. So I got the wrong mat, and I was bankrupt at the time, money-wise, but I was also spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally bankrupt from the, 10 years of hard drug use, So I walked in there, and I was right. I was totally right. It was all women. It was. It was like 90%. It was 9 women and me. It was 90% women, 1% or 10% male. And that was intimidating for me, And so I remember getting nervous, and I remember like looking at the women, and I was like, I'm gonna kick their ass in yoga today. Like I put on this defense. Like the defense was like, I need to protect myself because I'm going to look like an idiot. So like, I'm going to like try ridiculously hard so that I don't look like a loser. And so it was almost became a competition. Do you know what I mean or no? Yeah. And I'm just being completely honest right now. Like this is exactly where I was at that time. I'm not like this anymore. And like a lot of stuff has shifted for me. And so I walked in, and they were doing like these little stretches like this. I remember this one, for example, and this is before the class started. And so I didn't know like, what happens, like what's logistically supposed to happen with the yoga class. So I like roll out my thick mat, and then it rolls back up. It did. And so then I flipped it over, and then I start doing the stretches that these women are doing. And I'm like, okay, like this is yoga, and I'm like, I'm gonna kick their asses at yoga today. Like this is they picked the wrong person to go into competition with yoga, and this is before I even ever done it, And I was nervous, I had anxiety, like I was just extremely like beating myself up, like she asked us to touch our toes, I couldn't touch my toes. She asked me to do a push-up. I literally could not do a push-up because I put so many needles in my arms, I could not support myself with the arms. She taught me chaturanga on my knees, and like that was like the first place that I learned because like I was in that bad shape. I couldn't breathe, like I was a smoker at the time, and so I was like smoking nonstop. And so like doing a sun salutation, like I had to like stop and like have a breather, I had to be like, time out for a second, like let me catch my breath. And it was more like lead style format, or workshop format, intro style, that kind of stuff. And I just got my ass handed to me, physically I got my ass handed to me. It was a really like difficult, challenging experience. And I didn't like it because on a certain level, I saw the consequences of my actions as soon as I showed up the first day, which is part of the reason why I think people don't come back to yoga sometimes, is because they see the consequences of how they've lived in their body, and they're not willing to pay for the consequences of those actions. Sometimes that's bad food, other times it's drinking too much, other times it's smoking too much, other times it's like you work 90 hours a week, it's like ambitious, like, in your professional life, those kind of things, and they're not willing to like sort of, pay the piper, so to speak. And, I, on that day, I saw all of those consequences. And it's funny because, like all of us are free to, we're free to live however we want to live. There's obviously morality and ethics and all these kind of things, which are addressed in the Yoga Sutras, but we're free to make whatever decision we want to make with our life. Like if I wanted to drink and use again, that's a choice I can make, If I want to practice yoga, that's a choice I can make, If I want to raise a family, like that's a choice I can make, I want to work on myself, that's a choice I can make. but we're not free from the consequences of making those choices. Whatever the consequences are, all of us, so it's like we want to stay up until 11 o'clock at night. It might mean that the consequence of that action is that you're not going to practice tomorrow. Are you okay with that? And on that day, I felt all of the consequences of my actions, and it seemed overbearing, and it overwhelmed me. And this is consequences of 10 years not living very well. Okay, so I'm like sitting there, and because I felt all the consequences, I immediately, anytime I feel vulnerability, or at least back then, I show up with anger. Anger is a cover-up feeling for me, and also a cover-up feeling for a lot of people. So when I get angry, it's actually that I'm trying to hide something that is being exposed, okay? And on that day, it was being exposed, okay? And I saw all of the good things and all of the bad things. I saw all of the in-betweens, and I didn't like what I saw. Like, it was really like it was actually heartbreaking. And I laid down for Shavasana, and I remember I just cried my eyes out. And I didn't want her to see me cry. I didn't want the women to see me cry. I didn't want to be crying, but they were these big alligator, like, the big ones, the big ones, not the little ones, like the big ones. My eyes, I was just, every tear, I was getting more and more angry. And she got me up out of Shavasana, and I bolted to the door. I ran outside in the parking lot and smoked a cigarette in the yoga parking lot. I did. In the yoga parking lot, I sat there and smoked a cigarette. Yeah. All of the women that were coming out of the class, they had to be like, this guy is super. I mean, even today, it is strange if someone gets done with their yoga class and they go out and smoke a cigarette. I've seen it happen, but it's just like, things are not jiving the way that they're supposed to. Like, you make better choices because of yoga, but you go back to the bad choice. I don't know. So, anyways, and so I went outside, and I didn't want to feel the way that I felt. So I covered it up with a cigarette. That's what I did. I went to a fast food place, and I literally stuffed my face with food. I think it was McDonald's, and I just stuffed my face with food. And what I realized today is that the truth of the matter is that this. I was running away from how I felt, and believe it or not, that is ridiculously common when we are dealing with very difficult things in our lives, to run away from how we feel. And you have to feel it, or it sticks around, and I was being asked to feel it. See, that's not a coincidence. There are no coincidences. So it's like, you have to feel it. You have to experience it. That's the only way it moves on. Okay? So I didn't know it at the time. I'm speaking from experience now. I didn't know that at the time. And so I sat there, and I was like, I think I watched baseball for 5 hours after practice, and I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm stuffing my face with food. I'm just going to sit here and smoke cigarettes now. All right? So I don't have to feel that way. And so I called my sponsor, and I said, I don't know if it worked. I was like, I don't know if I liked it. It got me angry. It made me feel vulnerable. And I'm telling him all these things. And he said something that really changed my life. And he said, he's like, Taylor, this lady walked into your life six times, She didn't just show up to say, yeah, you should do yoga for you to do it once. That doesn't make any sense. It's like you're being pulled in this direction, and you just haven't fully accepted the fact that you're being pulled in this direction. I thought about it a little bit. I was like, I don't know if what you're telling me is true. And I hemmed and hawed. We talked some more, and he's like, Taylor, I don't know if you'll stay sober if you don't do yoga. Which is not a very 12-step thing to say. If he said a very 12-step thing to say is I think you could live without yoga. The 12 steps are going to save your life, But a 12-step person, my sponsor was saying I don't know if this new thing that you're doing, I don't know if you can live without it. Basically, that's what he said. And I was like, shit. And I was like, this is I mean, I was like, this is bullshit, really, that I have to go back, you know? And I hemmed and hawed, and I had like a whole week to think about it, you know? And so like Friday night shows up, and I go to the same meeting, and that meeting that I first met Joni at was on a Friday like midday. And I get done, I go home, I'm like, okay, I'll go to yoga the next day. And I went to bed, and I showed up at yoga the next day, and it was all women again, you know. It was, I still had the same mat, I wore the same shorts, everything was the same except for really me, how I showed up that day. I showed up grateful that I had an opportunity. I don't know why that I showed up grateful. It was just something like a different intention that I had with the practice, you know, like another thing that my sponsor suggested. There was a suggestion that I show up and just be teachable, you know, like just be present and try and be teachable, and don't compare yourself to another person. Like all of the things that we've all heard, you know, like my sponsor like told me this stuff, and I showed up there and I wasn't nervous. Like I wasn't trying to be in a competition. I was listening to like the things. And we went through the whole practice, and, you know, I still had my bad mat. I still like couldn't touch my toes. I still did chaturanga on my knees, all of those kind of things. But like when we got done, there was a much different experience. And I can't really pinpoint like why, besides the fact that there's a different intention, and I gave myself like a break. There was less anxiety, those kind of things. But we did the same practice. You know, we did half of the primary, we did half of the primary series on the first day, and we did the exact same thing on the second day. So on, it was a pretty like intense 10-week course. On the first class, we went all the way to Navasana. Right, yeah, she was a new teacher. I don't do that. I don't do that in the Beagle. When new people show up to my lead class in Columbus, I'm like, go home. I'm like, this is the wrong class to attend. Like, you can't be here. Because it's not okay for them to do. We don't do a half lead, but a full lead on Friday mornings. It's 60 push-ups. It's not acceptable for a new person to do. Like, Mysore class is where someone should start. But anyways, that's besides the point. And so we make it to Navasana, same sort of thing, and like I wasn't tallying up all of like these negatives and positives and all this stuff. Like I was just there. I was just in the beingness of like, you know, going through these poses and being aware and seeing how I improved a little bit. It was Ashtanga yoga. Like there was no abbreviations, there wasn't any blocks, there wasn't any, you know, skipping poses. It was like you were being taught, you know, workshop style, half of the practice. Yeah, and I got done, and I laid down, and I remember like feeling emotional again. And I'm like not a crier, okay? Like I don't really cry that often. And I laid down, and I started getting like alligator tears again. And only this time it wasn't because like. You know, it wasn't because like I was angry, you know, it was because like it was the first time in my life that I felt comfortable in my own skin. Like the first time in my whole life that I felt like I came home. Like I was never at home, like I was never like in my body, like present, you know, and felt comfortable there. You know, I compared myself to other people. I looked at other people, I wanted what they had. I never wanted what I had. And on that day, I wanted what I had. And that's a profound shift. That is a profound shift that happens within 2 weeks, you know, or a week from one another. That's a profound shift. And I sat there and like, you know, I told you God doesn't speak into my ear, but on that day, like literally I heard something in my ear. And most of the time I'll like sort of lessen it. I'll say like, oh yeah, a bird whispered in my ear. But that's bullshit. Like the truth of the matter is like I heard a voice, and the voice said, you're perfect just the way you are. And I busted out crying like I've never cried before. because never in my life did I say the words that I was perfect just the way that I was, especially because all of the crappy things that I've done in my life. Yeah. And I sat there, cried, my eyes out. It was the first time in my life that I felt comfortable in my own skin. It was the first time that I ever felt the grass was green on my side of the street. It was the first time ever. And I sat there and I soaked it up and I cried my eyes out, and I was like, I felt such like sort of like love or something like emanating, like there's some sort of like glow or some sort of healing thing that was happening. And she brought us out of Shavasana, and I was like, I mean, I probably looked like a train wreck. I mean, I probably looked like a train wreck, and because it was such an emotional experience. And I sat there and I was like, how do I do this every day? And she's like, just practice with me. Just come over to my house and you can practice with me. And like from that day, I made a decision to like literally practice every single day. Like even to this day, I'm still on the same train, practicing every single day. I mean, no I get moon days and Saturdays, like I take a day off, but there's this endless amount of practices, that are connected to this day from that day. There's never been a gap of practice, which is quite beautiful as well. And I had some like pretty amazing things, like for example, like once I really found that I wanted to do the practice, like I was supported on many different levels. About a year or maybe 2 years into practice, there was a lady who is from Columbus. Her name is Laruga Glazer. And she's from Columbus. And Joni knew her, and they're still friends today. We're all still friends today. And she was staying at Joni's house where she was getting like Swedish citizenship, okay? Because she lives in Sweden now. And I remember like, Joni was like, you need to take classes from this lady, and I still couldn't do like all of the primary series. And I introduced myself to Laruga, and like she had already been to Mysore by that time, that kind of stuff. And I remember like, I was like, I want you to be my teacher. And she's like, okay, I'll be your teacher. And I was like, can you do privates with me? And I had gotten a job by this point. Like a lot of stuff had changed from 6 months to, maybe 2 years of practice, something like that, and sobriety. And I was like, can you do privates with me? And she said, yeah, if you give me $20 a private. And I was like, deal. And just to put it in perspective, if you asked her to do a private today, she probably would say no. But and if she did say yes, it'd probably be $200. Yeah, or $250. And this is before she was authorized and all this stuff. But she was an amazing practitioner, at the time. So she was remarkable, and she really taught me everything about the practice. Like, so I had this like teacher that came in and taught me, and she got Swedish citizenship, and she went there to live with her partner, and then I was like without a teacher for a really long time. And I remember like looking at the list of authorized teachers. Like nowadays there's like roughly 100 of me's around the globe. All right, maybe a little bit more. But the people that travel, like myself, there's like, I don't know, maybe 10 people that travel. There's not a lot of traveling. People doing workshops. When COVID's not around, there's still not a lot of us that are traveling around teaching Ashtanga yoga. But, so there was on the list, I remember looking at the list and seeing this guy. His name was Matthew Darling. And he was from Michigan. And so Michigan is just the state above Ohio. And so I drove up to Michigan, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, and I take his first Mysore class, and I was like, hey, I'm here from Ohio. And he's like, great. He's like, enjoy your practice, that kind of stuff. And I was like, can we get coffee afterwards? And he's like, sure. He's like, sure, I can get coffee with you. And he sat down, and we were drinking coffee, and I said to him, hey, I'm in recovery. I'm a couple years sober, and like yoga has like made me from insane to like a sane person. I can operate because I thought he maybe didn't know anything about recovery or any of this kind of stuff. And I remember him looking back at me, and this is like how supported I was at this time, and I didn't really even know it. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I'm in recovery. And he said, you know what, I want to tell you something. He said, I'm 20 years sober as well. And, like, I think at that time, there was sort of like this prestige, and I think there is still to this day about being an authorized teacher. Like, people thought that somehow that, that there were infallible, they were not human beings as a result of being authorized, which is not true. I'm telling you how that's not true right now. We are human beings, just like anyone else. But I definitely, during that time, there wasn't a lot of like people that you could look up to. And the person that I went to, out of all of the people on this list, was also in recovery. And that felt like something that was like very supported, where all of a sudden like he could understand me in a way that I like needed to be understood. And I made trips back and forth, and I remember one time I said, I was like, Matthew, I remember talking to him, and our relationship was a lot better than, me and LaRuga's. LaRuga's was like teacher-student. Matthew was like big brother, little brother kind of relationship. LaRuga was like hard boundaries. He was like, I'll be your friend. I'll be, a person who goes to meetings with you. I'll be, like I'll support you. You can call me. It's like you can't call LaRuga. Like even before she was famous, you couldn't call her. So I'm like sitting there, and I was like, is there anything that I should do? And he said, the one thing that you need to do is go drink from the well. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, let me ask you this. He's like, how many people do you think have come from Ohio to learn from me, being an authorized level 2 teacher? How many people do you think? And I was like, I don't know, 100, 200, people, and he was like, no, you're the only one. You're the only one that has ever come, that outside of the state, to have me teach you. He's like, you need to go drink from the well. And I was like, well, what's this well? And he's like, you need to be a teacher, Taylor. Like, you need to be a teacher. And like, he's like, the well is India. You need to go meet Patabi Joyce, and you need to go, you need to go study with Sharat, and you need to kind of get on this path of like getting authorized and stuff. And he suggested it. And so I went to New York because Sharat was coming, and this is maybe like literally a couple months after he said that. That's when Patabi Joyce died. And then Sharat came to the United States, and I went to New York to practice with him, and it was an amazing experience. And literally, I knew from that moment that Sharat was actually my teacher, and I was in India 6 months later. Okay, this is like October of 2010. That's when I was there, or November of 2010. Yeah, so pretty crazy. And, the rest is history, to a certain extent. I got authorized on my 3rd trip to Mysore. And, I think authorization does matter, but I think the relationship between me and Sharat is really important. I could, the authorization, I think it matters, it's important, but I really care about having a teacher. That's what I really care about. I think that's what matters. And sometimes that gets lost a little bit. It's like that you actually need a teacher. You need someone that you can look to, that you can ask them difficult questions, someone who's available to you, those kind of things. And that's a relationship that I have with Sharat. He's an honorary director of the charity that I came up with. So in 2016, I wrote a book, it's called Away from Darkness. And for, I don't know, a month, it was an Amazon best read or something like that, or weekly read, because you could see, once it was released, you could see how many people were reading it at any given time on their Kindles. And so in 2016, February 2016, I was like watching the computer and like watching like 9,000 pages at this one moment were being read. And I was like, holy crap, that's so crazy. But I got authorization, and when I got authorization on the third time, when I went back the fourth time is when I gave Shrat the manuscript for my book. And most of the time, like people in recovery, they don't really talk about their recovery. Like it's anonymous, like you're supposed to be anonymous. And I broke a tradition in order for me to tell the story so that I could put it out there so I could help people. And the reason why I did it is because I felt sort of emboldened and proud with some of the work that I had done, like on myself and the people that I was helping. And I wanted to put it out there because like my friends were dying. You know, like I got sober with like maybe like 30 people, 30 guys like I would go to meetings with and all this kind of stuff. And by the time I wrote my book, like 25 of them were dead from the disease of alcoholism. It was staggering, really. And so I wrote this book for hope, you know, because I wasn't supposed to be the only one that practiced yoga and also practiced the 12 steps. Like it wasn't supposed to be just me that did that. It was supposed to be a lot of other people. And so when I gave Shrat the manuscript, the cool thing is that the next thing that was sort of kind of thrown out there is that I was going to start a charity. And so the Trinity Foundation, which September is the National Recovery Month. So if you watch my Instagram page or Ashtanga Yoga Club's Instagram page, it's like everyone practicing the challenge or teaching the class for us for donations. Okay, that's like really what we're trying to do, is get donations. Because nowadays, like the Trinity Foundation supports hundreds of people. So we pay for scholarships for people to come and practice yoga. I was fortunate. You know, I was fortunate in the fact that by the time like yoga showed up in my life, I had money for it. You know, but there's so many people out there that don't have the $100, you know, or the 100 euros it is to practice yoga. They don't have it. So the Trinity Foundation raises money so that we can have people on scholarship, and we pay for people to come to places just like this and practice. And all they have to do is show up 3 times a week. That's literally all they have to do. They apply for it. And we have hubs in, actually, maybe this should be a hub, but we have them in the UK, we have them in Mexico, we have 50 programs in the United States. We almost have one for every state, like we're getting really close to that, of yoga schools that are aligned with me. So then all of a sudden what happens is a person goes to treatment, and we teach them in treatment centers. So we have 50, 100 teachers that go into to treatment centers and teach Ashtanga yoga to them when they're in treatment in the hospitals. And then when they get out, they have the opportunity to apply for scholarships. And so that they go from a bad community into a good community, surround themselves with people of like-minded. So it's like I started this charity, and like Shrat is the honorary director, and like I got authorized and wrote this book. All of this, kind of came to me because, like, this is my dharma. Like, this is what I was supposed to do with my life. Dharma is roughly translated as, like destiny. Like, these are the things that you're supposed to do. This is like passion. This is purpose. Like this is living empowered. Those kind of things. And I never, like how I started the conversation, never in a million years in high school did I ever say like I wanted to be a yoga teacher. But now, like what I realize is that I have this charity that I support. There's hundreds of people that are on scholarship and people that work for the charity. There's, thousands of people have read my book, as hope. I get to teach at workshops like this, and help people like figure out how to work through the things that they're dealing with. Like today, like my life is of service, where before it was not of service. It was selfish. 100%. And I realized that I had an opportunity to show people like what addiction looks like, and that's what I've been doing. I've done it in China, I've done it in Israel, I've done it in Germany, I've done it in South Africa, in Italy, UK, Scotland. I've done it in basically every state in the United States. I go around, like every person that teaches workshops, you know, like we teach there's a lot of same, you know, we teach a lot of the same stuff. Like it's, you know, but the personality, the person that shows up in front of you is different. I believe in the practice maybe more than anyone else. And the reason why is because it's literally saved my life. You know, like if I wouldn't have done yoga, like I wouldn't be here today. Like I would be another one of those 25. I didn't actually think I was ever going to make it out of like the 27. I thought I was going to be part of the 27-year-old club, like Kurt Cobain, you know, like the other people, you know, Jim Morrison, all those people. You know, I started yoga when I was 26. Like, I mean, what a miracle that it came in. Because I literally would say that, like, I'm not gonna live past that. You know, just because of how hard I was living. You know, so like, yeah, all of the workshop teachers, we teach the same, but it's like we all come from our own experience. My experience is that the practice literally can save your life. But the problem is you have to give it more. You have to give it more. If you're not willing to give it more, then you're just spinning your wheels. Like you can put one foot in the pool and still get benefits from it, you know? One foot in the hot tub, you know, and you can get benefits from the hot tub. But like to get all the way in and get in the deep end and really like let it work for you can literally transform your life. And I've seen it for countless of people that have showed up for training with the Training Foundation, and I've seen it countless people who have just showed up to my class that have like dedicated themselves to something bigger and better. I've seen people start jobs. I've seen people get clear that they want to have a family. I've seen people get pregnant or women get pregnant. I've seen literally down the line, I've seen so many amazing things. People become doctors, nurse practitioners, people who found like themselves again through the practice. It's literally the most fascinating and amazing thing that I've ever seen. Because like what I realized today is that this is a gift that has been given to you. And start treating it as such, and then all of a sudden like it pays off huge dividends. Like the person that I was talking about earlier, I don't even know that person anymore. I can still feel like a lot of the things that, you know, like I was describing, but I don't even know that person anymore. You know, like it's not like I said, I have whatever decision I want to make, I could go drink or use. Like I would never do that. Like that option it's an option, but it's never the situation or the life that I have today would never give me the opportunity to do that because of yoga, which is freaking amazing, you know? And so it always like begged the question of like, okay, well, I mean, why does it work? You know, like it's a really fascinating thing. And if you've been around the practice enough, you see people like, you go from like not being able to do something to like maybe being able to do something, and then all of a sudden like you can do something. You know what I mean? Like you go from like not getting anywhere close to Marichasana D, you know, and then all of a sudden like you bind your hands in Marichasana D, and you're like, wait a second, you know? And there's like a big shift where it's like, oh yeah, I can't do that. Like it's not possible. But then you're like, okay, well, wait a second. Like if the teacher helped me and I'm getting further on my own, maybe there's a possibility that's going to happen, you know? And then all of a sudden, like the next one comes and it comes through consistency, being disciplined. You're showing up every day, like you're making good life choices or, you know, relatively good life choices. And literally you're sitting there and you're like, this is possible now. You know, how did that happen? How did we go from I can't to maybe to I can? And those are the kind of lessons that literally transform people's lives. And the reason why is because like you take that experience and apply it to something that happened in your life. I can't get through this thing. Okay, maybe I can get through this thing. I've been through this thing. I can do this again. And that is experience that continues. So this lesson that you learn on the mat, essentially you're able to take it out into your life and apply the exact same thing. I can do this instead of I don't think I can do it, right? It's like standing in your own 2 feet and sitting there and owning it. That I can do whatever I put my mind to because I've seen it happen in my freaking yoga practice. over and over and over and over. I've seen it in other people. I've seen it in me. I've seen it in hundreds of people, where all of a sudden, like, the lights go off and say, like, I am capable, I am supported, and I'm able to do this shit. You know, in life or whatever it is, I'm able to do it. And man, when you really stand there and you feel that supported from the practice and your higher power and all this sort of stuff, you are more powerful beyond measure. And like literally you cannot measure it because that's how powerful it is. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's like, man, and I said it's a gift. Like, it is a gift because guess what? There's been hundreds of people that have walked in this room that are not practicing right now. They've forgotten. They went back to sleep. Okay? They went back to sleep. We have an opportunity every day to wake up a little bit more. Okay? To like continue to practice, to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to see what the possibilities of where I can go. But here's what some people don't understand about me. And I'll give you like a little thing. And you'll get to understand me a little bit more than I don't really share this ever, but I'll share it with you. Is that I truly believe that the life that I'm living today is a second chance, and there is no third chance. Like, I don't believe that there's a third chance for me. And what I mean by that is I don't think that if I drink or use again, I don't think that I will be here anymore. Like it will take my life. I guarantee it. I've seen it happen way too many times. And when you live and you practice and you take the whole thing and you live your life like this is a second chance, like this is bonus territory, you know, and you've seen the practice transform your life and other people's life, it's like I'm sitting there going like, how far can I go? How far can I go? What's the furthest you can go? How do you make the biggest amount of impact that you can make? You know, like how do you do that? You know, and that's like a little bit into my subconscious because like I'm not afraid today to be myself. I'm not afraid of anything today as a result of like what the practice has taught me. And that's just not me patting myself on the back. It's the experience of what I feel. It's like, I've been supported this entire time. You can be too. You have been, you know, however it is, from a teacher or from, you know, the community, the Ashtanga community, you know, Cologne, you know, like whatever, Germany, you know, like you are being supported from these things, which is pretty amazing, you know. So, but then again, I started asking myself, okay, well, you know, like, how do you apply this philosophy? You know, like, how do you, you know, that's like part of what I was just telling you is how to take the practice and having it be personal growth. You know, like that's personal growth. Like that happens in people's lives. It's sort of like, you know, like it's a self-help, you know, aspect of the practice, which happens, right? You know, but there's also this like spiritual element as well. And the spiritual element is based off of, sorry, maybe I need to look at the time. It's like, all of a sudden it's like 9 o'clock. Sorry, I had to look at the clock. So all of a sudden it's like, well, how do you take this philosophical or spiritual aspect of the practice and how do you apply it? So I started doing like research, and I'll tell you a quick story because I think it's fascinating. And so Columbus, Ohio, it's like the 12th largest city in the United States. Like most of the time people think it's much smaller than that. It's pretty big, like it's big. And so there's a million people or 1 million plus people there, really spread out too. But I taught my very first workshop at this guy, a private country club. And the private country club was called New Albany Country Club. And the guy who owned it is the guy who started The Limited and started Victoria's Secrets. His name is Les Wexner. He's been in the news for all of the bad reasons, right, recently. But he had this club, and they invited me to do a workshop because I just basically gotten authorized right around that. Or no, it was right before I went on my first trip. And I was sitting there, and I was doing this workshop. There's 50 people there, and I was teaching them about yoga, and I was getting ready to chant before the class started. And this Indian family comes in, and when the Indian family comes in, they lay their mats down really fast. I wait for them, and I said the chant, and I did it slow. We didn't do call and response. And at the end of the class, not at the end of the chant, but at the end of the class, the Indian lady who came in late to the class said, "Thank you for waiting for us. Sorry that we were late." And she was super blunt. She said to me, "You said 2 Sanskrit words wrong." That's literally what she said to me. And I was like, "Okay, wow, what's your name?" Wow, it's like, that's a pretty, intense feedback to get right away. And she said, "Well, the thing about Sanskrit is if you say it wrong, you're actually saying something different. Okay, so it means a lot. You need to make sure that you're saying it correctly." It's like, okay. I was like, "Do you know someone who can teach me Sanskrit?" She said, "I know a guy." She introduced me via email to this guy. His name is Sri Ashwath. And he was a Vedic guru that was in Columbus, Ohio, which is strange. Like, it doesn't happen. You don't find these guys if I don't think that there would be one in Columbus. It's like, I think it would be hard pressed to get it. You could fly someone in from India, but to have them in Columbus, Ohio is seems like it's not possible. So I have a sit-down meeting with the guy to ask him to be my teacher for Sanskrit, chanting, and teach me the Yoga Sutras and those kind of things. And I said, "I'm going to Mysore, India in a few months." And he said, "Oh, I have cousins there." I was like, "Oh, cool." I was like, "That's awesome." I was like, "Well, I'm going to Mysore." And I was like, "I practice Ashtanga yoga and all this stuff." He said, "That's funny. My cousin runs a school, and it's called the Krishna Patabi Joyce Institute. And my cousin is Patabi Joyce. Do you know Patabi Joyce?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. Yeah." And he said, "Oh yeah, this is my cousin." And I was like, if ever you feel supported, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is craziness. And so for 9 years, well, actually, I guess it's been 16 years now. I was his student, and I learned all the Sanskrit and all of that kind of stuff, which is pretty amazing, And he started teaching me the sutras, and he started breaking them down for me so that I could teach them to people like us. Because how they're taught to Indians is much different than how they are taught to us. And partially because of the Sanskrit, the transliteration of them, and that sort of stuff. I know how to say all the sutras, but a lot of times for us, it doesn't actually help to say it in Sanskrit. It actually helps just to give commentary on them. Okay, that means more to us because we don't understand how the Sanskrit language works. Just to put that out there. And so he started this, and I remember he said there's 2 ways to understand what the first Yoga Sutra is saying to you. And the first one is that now the study of yoga begins, which assumes that all of this work that you've done has got you to the point where now you can learn yoga. That's usually traditionally, if you look at sort of the commentaries on that sutra, there's 195 of them, but the commentaries on that sutra, it's pretty consistent with something along those lines. We know this? But what he said was, actually, another way to put it out there is that the study of yoga is now, which is the same sort of translation, only it's flip-flopped, right? The study of yoga is now, and that is relevant with what we're doing with our practice. Because what I know is that when you show up to class, the worst thing that you can do is actually check out when you're on your mat. Because the best thing about Ashtanga yoga is that we continue to do the same thing over and over and over again. And we're trying to build awareness, trying to build focus. The worst thing that you can do with it is come in, do the same thing over and over, and not pay attention to what you're doing. That's how you get hurt. okay? And it doesn't help you getting focused or, find meditation or meditation or any of that kind of stuff. Which is pretty crazy. And so like the study of yoga is now, it's like, okay, like, and he's like, apply this to your life, like apply this to your practice. Like it's in this moment. There is no other moment. All of them, yesterday is gone. Tomorrow never happens. It always manifests in this moment. This is the only moment that we have all the time. This is the only moment. And I remember him saying that to me, and it was like, hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, man, how often am I projecting into like 2 years down the road? Worst case scenario, or how often do I look back at all of the bad stuff that I did and have all the guilt and shame and remorse and all of these things, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second. Study of yoga is right now. It's me paying attention to what is happening in me right now. And I was like, I can apply that one. Okay? I was like, I get that. So then he went on to the second one, and he was like, it says, Yogas Chitta Vritti Narodaha, right? And we don't need to know what the words are, but basically it means like yoga in this context, in the book, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, in this context, yoga is about you figuring out how to balance out and bring some sort of equanimity to the mind so that you can see the true reflection of who you are as the mind calms down. So you can see the reflection of your soul, essentially. Okay? Right? You got this? But the thing that gets in the way is, like in layman's terms, is your traumas, is the bad stuff that has happened to you. Memory gets in the way, or your recollection of something that has happened gets in the way of you actually finding yoga. Okay? It'd be like having that replayed over and over and over again, that it creates this conditioned pattern of living, which sort of expresses this trauma. And that trauma, potentially, or at least partly, the trauma of your life, which we all have this, is it's tied to the word vritti. And vritti means, in Sanskrit, it means whirlpool. And so like the best way to explain this is think about my story, what I just told you, okay? This, the vritti that I had, this conditioned pattern of living was addiction, okay? It wasn't until like, I had lost everything that all of a sudden like I was able to step out of the whirlpool to make changes. Yoga was a big part of that. My ex-wife was a big part of that as well. Like I couldn't have done it myself. Like things happened that got me outside of that. And the vrittis like express themselves through negative behaviors and positive behaviors. They express themselves. And those vrittis are traumas, essentially. Okay? So, and if they're not, what happens is like you can think of the vrittis as grooves of a record. Your life is an expression of every vritti that you actually have. Every thought process that you have is literally continually played out nonstop. If you don't feel good about yourself, you don't feel empowered, you don't feel like, that you feel a victim of something, those all get expressed in every single interaction. Every decision you make or indecision that you make is all based in the vrittis of your life. This is collected experience. Now, sometimes they can be generational vrittis as well. They can be ethnic vrittis as well. Like these are all like ties that bind, essentially, you to this experience that everyone in your culture has together. Okay, this happens, and so like I think of like African American people in the United States, a shared experience of like their ancestors were slaves. They don't know what their last names are. They don't know what country they're from as a result of how they were treated, and so that gets expressed in every single thing that happens. It happens with all and happens with us too in different vrittis. And that gets expressed nonstop. What the Yoga Sutras goes on to say is that if you can sort of take the needle of the record that's being played and move it to the next vritti or out of the vrittis entirely, what you're able to see is your reflection. And it says something really profound, or at least I find it profound. And it says, if you are able to do that, because the first 4 sutras are basically give the whole thesis statement of the whole thing. The third one essentially says, like, if you are able to do that, then you will rest in your true nature. Okay? Which is essentially like sort of what I told you in the story that I just told you. Like, somehow there was like sort of this coming to the life that I was supposed to lead instead of the life that I was living. Okay? And so if you do step out of it, then you're able to have this reflection of who you are supposed to be. Okay? But then it gives a warning. The fourth one is a warning. And the fourth one says, and if you don't, then you will continue to be like ruled by the vibration of the traumas or the vrittis that are in your head. And you will continue to think that you know who you are based off of you paying attention to your mind, but you will not know who you are, who you truly are. So it's like if you pay attention to the voices that are in your head, the stories that you tell yourself, then essentially you will become what the mind tells you, and the mind in the Yoga Sutras is not your friend. It is not your friend. It will tell you, it will treat you bad, it will tell you lies, and will try and keep you small. And if you haven't realized that yet, you need to start paying attention to it, okay? Because that will happen to you. Where all of a sudden the mind will not allow you to make decisions that best serve you because of this thing called ahamkara, which ahamkara is roughly translated as ego. Your ego prefers to stay the same. It does not want to change. It wants to stay the same. And you will express sameness instead of moving the needle. And that is basically when you are asleep. And we are all asleep to a certain degree, or at one point we were all asleep, and we don't have to be, because this has been given as a gift to you so that you don't have to feel, see, or be that anymore. It's unbelievable, right? And so like this spiritual aspect, this philosophical avenue of the practice is just as powerful as this, this personal help, growth way of looking at the practice, which I also shared. There's this connection. And one of the things that strikes me the most is that the Yoga Sutras, on many occasions, it says, if you can't do ahimsa, you can't find, if you can't be trusted or truthful, and if you can't find the fluctuations of the mind, the only other thing that you can do in order to find yoga is surrender to your higher power. It's the only other thing that you can do in order to find yoga. Through devotion of something higher than yourself, and it could be the practice, it could be, like devotion to, maybe it's going to church, or maybe it's, reading spiritual text, or devoting yourself to the higher power is the only other way that you can find your true nature, if you're unable to do it through the process of discrimination, like what I'm talking about here. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. And I find it fascinating because it's like there's so much work to do, but it's like you could also have like faith in the practice, faith in the movements that you're making, not with regard to just the practice, but your whole life. Like having faith is like an amazing way to walk through life, accepting life on life's terms, or it's good for me, maybe. I can keep it more personal. And so we've been given this gift, and like I've seen so many people like only devote part of themselves to it. It's like they have this yoga, but they don't have these other things. They don't dive in a little bit deeper. And I'm like here to say that if you devote 100% of your life to it, not that it needs to take over your life, but like you really give yourself to the practice, you try that much harder, you work on the things that scare you, what happens is like everything changes. Yeah. Remarkable growth comes from this. And like I've said, I've seen it over and over and over again. In my case, and countless of others around me. You know. So, okay. How we doing? We have the people that have been given this, we have a huge responsibility. And the responsibility is either use it, you know, it's like, don't waste this opportunity. Because there's countless of other people that have went back to sleep and it's our job to wake up, okay? It's like there is no better, time than right now to do this work, to be better people, to find our passion, to find our purpose, to stop living our lives for a paycheck and live it for like what speaks to our heart, okay? Yeah. It's a much more beautiful way to live. Okay. All right. So, did that make sense? Yeah? Well, hopefully it inspired you a little bit to work a little harder on your yoga practice. Because whatever you give is what you get. Just remember that. Okay? So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for listening to me talk. Again, thank you for having me here. Thank you for letting me share my story. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep or close to sleep. But, and hopefully I left you with a couple of things that you need to think about. Okay? See y'all tomorrow at 8:30. Yep. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for being here.